Today we're going to talk about growing your business with the cloud, and I'm going to take us through defining this a little bit more with all of us here as we go through. Two main things we want to get through today in the next 45 or so minutes. We'll gain some clarity around what we mean by the cloud. And I've got the cloud in quotes up here. Because we use that phrase and that term a lot, and you'll see it in names of companies, you'll see it in names of products. Cloud is something that's become pretty ubiquitous just in terms of being equated to some sort of technology, and we'll provide some clarity around it. Let's go through a little bit more by what do we mean by that, and we'll start the conversation of how cloud services can benefit each one of your businesses. And this is not going to be a 45-minute silver bullet. All of a sudden, eureka! You've got a way to harness some of that $19 trillion that our keynote speaker mentioned during the keynote. But the intent is to get you thinking. Is to start the conversation. And many of you, in many cases, it's not so much starting the conversation; it's actually extending the conversation. I think many of you are going to be surprised at how much the cloud actually impacts you, or you're actually using the cloud today. And this is the start of the conversation to expand that and try to harness some of that $19 trillion. That definitely got my attention this morning. So we'll go through these key things, and we'll step through these. Who uses the cloud? What is the cloud? And again, I've got the cloud in quotes here. We'll go through a little bit more defining of what I mean by that. Then understanding some of the reasons why. So why so much interest in it? And it's not just because we're using it as day-to-day consumers. There's lots of reasons why, from a business standpoint, the cloud makes a lot of sense to further explore in each one of our individual industries to determine how we can harness some of that. Go through some of the language of the cloud, just some of the terms you're going to see in here, probably throughout the rest of today in the other seminars, and as well as when you pick up a newspaper, when you look through your vertical industry magazines. A lot of them are going to refer to some of these terms, and we're going to go through a few of the more common ones. And then some next steps, and these next steps aren't going to be necessarily blow your mind next steps. I'd like to look at these as baby steps to get you started in the conversation around how we can move this forward, how we can advance the conversation with you. And understanding that this is not, there is no silver bullet around the cloud. There's things that jump out at each and every one of us, and that's one of the cool things about all of us being here, is that we're all in different industries. We all have different things that interest us, but ultimately there's a lot that we can do with the technology together. And in answering the first question at the top, I'm pleased to have our guest speaker today, David Hurd from Hawaii DKI, who I'll be calling up later on in the presentation. And he's gonna give a brief description. We'll have a brief conversation about some of the things that Hawaii DKI is doing with the cloud and how it's used within their organization. So just a little bit about me. As Takemi, our room monitor here, mentioned, Ryan Miyamoto. I'm a senior product manager in the business markets at Hawaiian Telcom. And I've got my email address up there. Feel free to contact me with any questions, or during the seminar, if you have those questions, as Takemi mentioned, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the seminar. I've been with Hawaiian Telcom for, it's going to be 14 years now, and this at first I thought this was my third HT University presentation, but I actually realized that it's my fourth, and I realized that a little bit by accident. I was cleaning out my computer area at home, and I found my mouse pad that I use. I like it because it's kind of rectangular shape, but it's more in that vertical orientation instead of the usual shape of a mouse pad. But it's a GTE mouse pad. Under that GTE mouse pad, I had stuck my name tag. And that name tag was actually from 1996, when I was actually asked as a freshman at UH to do a presentation about Kailua High School, where I graduated from, and to give an overview about the digital revolution that was happening at that time. And that was a theme in 1996, was a digital revolution. So kind of come full circle here in that The revolution continues today. We're here to talk to you about hosting a revolution, about cloud services. So I'm very pleased to be here going on my fourth HT University presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started into the meat of the prezo now. So this is my cloud picture, and I actually took this picture. This is off Kewalo Basin. So do you use the cloud? How many of you here in this room, show of hands, use the cloud in your business? Pretty good. I would say that's probably about 25%, 20, 25, maybe 30%. Well, there was a survey done of Hawaii businesses that asked basically the same question. The number came out to be 9%, which was a surprising number, I think, to many of us, in that it was 9%. So we asked ourselves, why is it? And probably one of the reasons why, as I was going through this presentation, was it's really vague in terms of what we mean by the cloud. What exactly is that? And that was kind of the way that we phrased that question to folks. So take a step back and let's look at what the cloud isn't first. It's not something physical. It's not something you can run to a building or take a trip out to some big facility and see this is the cloud. This is the only cloud. It's not a single absolute item that we all could go and pay pilgrimage to and go out and visit the cloud. Right? It's not a single absolute thing. It's not even something that you necessarily buy. You don't necessarily buy the cloud. Right? What the cloud is it's basically a service that's delivered, utilized, or consumed over a network. And if you're doing that, you are actually using a cloud service. And so many of you, as about a third of you raise your hands, realize that you probably are using the cloud today in some way, shape, or form. And that's why it's not so much about starting a conversation about utilizing the cloud, it's about how do we extend that. Because many of us here are using it. So why is this important? And there's three key things that typically come to mind. First of all, the cloud really levels the playing field, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Second, it allows you to really focus on your core business as opposed to your core business functions. And third, the need to be able to work anytime, anywhere, mobility, is something that's also driving all of us to look at ways that we can use cloud technology to enhance our business processes. So leveling the playing field. One of the large challenges of technology, and as was mentioned in the keynote, one of the thing about IT assets and buying equipment and so on has been the fact that to really leverage the latest and greatest, you had to make significant investment in either equipment, in hardware, in software, in personnel. And personnel often can be one of the larger parts of the cost equation there. Outside of actually buying the equipment, buying the software, and paying for all that, having somebody be knowledgeable enough to know what needs to change when your business changes, what needs to happen if the hardware needs to be replaced, if the software needs to be upgraded, if you happen to add on a new line of business, all of that, that's labor that needs to be spent by your business, whether you're outsourcing it to somebody else or whether you're fortunate enough to have somebody who's in-house who has that experience. That's a large investment. And previously, a lot of these tools that were the latest and greatest were generally priced that way. They were very expensive tools, and they were available to the largest of organizations who had the dollars, who could say, sure, I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and spin up this server, let's go ahead and purchase this software and put a couple of guys on coding this out and building out something for us. Those best-in-class tools are now accessible to all of us. Whether you're a single sole proprietorship with a very focused and very, very tight organization of basically yourself, or whether you have a large IT staff. These best-in-class tools are now available and easily consumable by all organizations, not just the largest of enterprises. And that opens the door to a lot of the innovation that's out there today. Second, lowering the turn-up cost and the initial investment, another large factor. As one of the other points made in this morning's keynote that was made was the capital investment that would often come with exploring new technology. Buying those servers, buying the software. That's a lot of capital that's been spent on IT assets and on technology assets, and for good reason, because you're doing that to invest in your business. But that's all investment that could have been spent maybe expanding your actual core business or the part of the business that's actually your value proposition to your customers, as opposed to the functions that help support that core business. So the lower cost to entry, by the fact that it's a shared infrastructure, helps allow you to get access to these best-in-class tools without making that upfront investment that previously was a prerequisite to even be able to utilize some of these technologies in your business. Third, scalability, and this is a huge thing as you're growing, because when you're starting out, and especially whether it's something that you're beginning to explore as a technology, or whether that technology is supporting a business function that you're also starting to grow, but you're starting off and you need to be able to grow into it, cloud technology allows you to have something that's going to scale with you. So it's not so much I'm going to start off with this, and then when I grow to a certain size, I know I'm going to need to shelve it and move to something else. And that's something that when you've bought traditional assets, that's typically the balance that you had to play was, I'm going to buy this thing, and I'm going to balance it to be the best thing that I can afford right now, but I also know that I can't buy the equipment that I'm going to need 5 years from now when I grow to be the size that I want to be. I'm going to get the best piece of equipment that I can get today, and then 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when I outgrow it, I'll get something else. The cloud technology does away with that philosophy around having to buy only what fits you now and then having to shelve it and move on to something larger. It can scale with you. So the cloud technology from a business standpoint really allows you to start with what you need and then grow it to what you want to become. And all of us have business plans, all of us have ideas of where we are now, realizing that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, that growth is something that we are striving to hit, and that's what the cloud technology allows you to support as a business function. So speaking of business functions, really differentiating between your core business and your core business functions. A lot of times when we talk about technology, we talk about a lot of the things that interest me personally, because that's some of the services that I'm delivering as a product manager. But it's not so much your main point of interest, because your customers are extracting value from you for delivering something. And you can tell that I wrote this while I was a little bit hungry. So a bakery that bakes the perfect cupcake, that is their business, right? I'm not going there because of the fact that they have an awesome phone system, although maybe I will, because I'm kind of in that industry as well. But for most of us, that's not the reason you're going to go to them. You're going to go to them because they bake an awesome product. The fact that you can call them to order something, right, and have them actually answer the phone and take your order and put aside half a dozen of cupcakes that you can then go and pick up, that's a function, right? It's a core function, because if I can't do that, I can't purchase what they're baking. But it's not what their core business is, right? Their core business is baking the ideal cupcake that then their core business functions, such as their telephone system, such as their email, such as their point of sale system, all of those support that, that ability to deliver value to your end user customers. So the cloud allows you to do that. Really focus on your core business and let other people manage and work through the core functions that support that core business. That way you're experts at what you are and what you're doing. You don't have to become an expert in each of the individual functional areas that support it. So work anytime, anywhere, and all of us, and I can see it out on the tables in front of all of you, either have a laptop, you have a smartphone, you have an iPad. I don't think I've gone to a meeting in the last probably 12 to 18 months where if you look at the table, there's not a single bit of desk space because everybody's got all these electronic devices spread out all over the place because all of us are mobile now. Whether we're here at the convention center, whether we're in the office, or whether we're out in the field, the expectation of our customers has become that we are always available anytime, anywhere, any place that's convenient for our customers to be able to do business with us. And that mobility has driven one of the reasons why the cloud has become a much more significant part of many businesses in terms of supporting their core functions, because those core functions need to be able to support that mobility. So application data mobility, and being able to access your customer relationship records in the cloud, via any device, being able to look up what that person bought or what that person did or who that person is and what company they're from. Being able to look up any of that, whether you're here at the convention center, whether you're in your office, whether you're out in the field, whether you're at home. And unfortunately for many of us, probably even when you're out on vacation, the ability to have your applications and your data travel with you or be accessible to you any place, anywhere, is becoming a table stakes item for many industries, many of us here in the room. And no longer is business defined by a single place or location or storefront. Doesn't mean that those storefronts are going away, or if you have an actual physical storefront, that's not going to be there. It's just that the boundaries have basically been blown out of the water, where it's no longer just that particular building that represents your business. It's much larger than that. And this also leads to that discussion around, well, what happens if that physical location is no longer there? Can business actually continue on and actually be transparent to your customers? So the cloud plays into both of those, both in terms of the mobility piece of being able to conduct business on a day-to-day basis and being able to keep in contact with your customers and interact with your customers and do business with your customers, as well as in the event of an unplanned situation, what happens at that point? Does business continue on business as usual, or does your business get interrupted at that point in time? And these are things that the cloud as a technology is enabling us to start asking those questions and to really start to see how we can fit that into each one of our organizations. So the cloud language, many of you are probably using the cloud today, as I mentioned, and there's a lot of different functions that are services that are provided within the cloud. Some of these you may recognize as things that you're actually doing today. Email is a very common service, and it's a very common service that's delivered in the cloud. Very few of us have servers anymore that are fully dedicated to running email. That used to be the way you would do it. You would pick up a server, you'd pick up a mail exchange program, you'd connect that to a network, and you'd handle all of your mail delivery, your electronic mail delivery within that box itself that was within your office. Many of us don't do that anymore. Many of us have moved that as a service out to the cloud. And you'll see that referred to as something as a service. You'll see that terminology used a lot, something as a service. We usually don't think of email as a service, but that's because many of us are already using it as a cloud service today. It's usually when we think of things that we don't traditionally think of as a service, for example, point of sale as a service, storage as a service, and I'm going to go into some of the two more common ones in an upcoming slide. That's when we start to see some of this terminology. So you'll see that as a service used quite a bit. Now, you have to be careful when you type out AAS, because Microsoft Office likes to try to outsmart itself in terms of recognizing what you're trying to spell. But it, as a service, is something that you'll see a lot of. The first common one is software as a service, probably one of the more common ones out there today. That's SaaS, SaaS. You'll hear people like to spell it out, people like to pronounce it as a word, many different forms of that. So what exactly is that? And it's basically applications that perform some sort of function. And examples are communication, collaboration, some sort of function, business function over a network. Your typical examples, some of these were on the other slide: Office applications, unified communication, email, point of sale, CRM. These are all examples of software that's delivered as a service where you're not specifically putting equipment or you're loading an actual software application on your computers or actually buying a piece of hardware to actually place and turn up. These are things that are being delivered over a network, and you're consuming them via the network. Some of the more common providers of these services, you've got Microsoft is definitely one of the larger ones with Office 365, and you've probably seen a lot more about Office 365 than you have about the box copies of Office. In fact, I was kind of surprised when I walked into one of the larger electronic stores here, was that the amount of box software that's available today. I remember when you used to go in and there used to be rows and rows and rows of box software. Today, those rows have really, really shrunk down, and a lot of the focus is on delivering things like Microsoft Office as Microsoft Office 365 in the cloud. And I know we have some folks from Microsoft here who probably have more than any one of us could possibly handle in terms of information about Office 365, but that's definitely one of the key applications there. You've got Salesforce. Salesforce.com is one of the more common applications and well-known providers of both a CRM as well as sales lead, sales funnel management. I can see some of our salespeople here in the audience. They're very, very familiar with Salesforce as a system. You've got point of sale. You've got Square, which has those little dongles that plug into your smartphone. You can take credit cards. You actually can turn your smartphone into a point of sale system. If anybody wants to see a demonstration of that, you can give me your credit card. I'll be more than happy to swipe it through my Square box up here. And of course, Hawaiian Telcom. Our unified communications, our hosted voice service is a unified communication service delivered in the cloud. So that's software as a service. Other common one, infrastructure as a service, IaaS. And that's also one that you'll hear more about. In fact, we've got several of our sponsors, and some of the exhibit booths up there can tell you more than you'd want to know about infrastructure as a service. It's basically some sort of shared infrastructure, some sort of shared computing infrastructure that's then delivered to you, whether it's servers, whether it's storage, it's processing, it's backup, it's things like that, where it's something you would normally buy as infrastructure that you'd place on your own premises, then instead you're placing somewhere else, and you're reaching that infrastructure now over a network. So some examples of that. Probably one of the most well-known, or one of the oldest providers of that, Amazon and their web services. And Amazon is kind of an interesting one where they've built out quite a bit of services to support their business, to support their organization, and have actually productized it into something that they offer up to other organizations. Two local examples, again, Hawaiian Telcom, as well as Systemetrics. And both of those, or Systemetrics and Hawaiian Telcom, are both, of course, here. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to them at the exhibit booths. And there's also a few more seminars, I believe, today with both of these, or with Systemetrics as well as some of our Hawaiian Telcom folks. But infrastructure as a service is another one of the more common ones that you're going to hear about. Definitely mentioned in this morning's keynote about moving infrastructure away from the business having to purchase it, right, and outlay that capital, and really consuming it more as a service. Then one other as a service that I found personally interesting, and again, the purpose of Hawaiian Telcom University is one of education. It's one of being able to share a lot of the knowledge that we all have here collectively, built over over the years in our individual businesses, and being able to talk about it. One of the ones that I found really interesting, or have found interesting for the last couple of years, has been one that I don't really see as much, but it's really interesting. It's labor as a service. It's something just called crowdsourcing. And what that is people power. Moving people power out, taking probably one of the most advanced computing engines, right, our human brains, and putting that out on the cloud. And using that as a way using the cloud as a way to aggregate, solicit, evaluate, pay for, deliver these results, all via the cloud. Being able to harness that actual individual powers, things that couldn't be done by an algorithm or something that's programmed into an application. And some of the more common ones around that, and there's quite a few companies that are growing right now in this particular industry. Amazon is also one with their Mechanical Turk. There's also Crowdflower. There's a bunch of these crowdsourcing types of organizations, and all of these are considered under this title of labor as a service, LaaS, and it's one that you don't see as often. Definitely the first two, software as a service, infrastructure as a service, are the two most common, and those would probably have the most application to all of us today here in this realm. But further out in the future, this is an interesting one to me, labor as a service. And just to give you an example, in case any of you wanted to had some free time and wanted to earn, it looks like 6 cents or 4 cents or whatever it is. These are micro tasks, and it looks like it's a small amount. Basically, you're taking a very large task that would take somebody hours and hours and hours to do. You're splitting it up into these little micro tasks and farming it out over the cloud to individuals to evaluate, complete, and then get paid for doing these tasks. And then within the cloud, aggregating it back together into a completed solution that goes back to the original requester. So, some examples of that are, you've got folks who go through to do data mining, right? And data mining, in many cases, you can do that with a database. You can do that a lot faster and a lot easier with a computer and an algorithm and a well-run database. Usually it's easier, but there's some things that a database can't be programmed for. One example that Amazon used was when they were building out their mapping tools, they were doing something like similar to what Google does with Street View, where they took pictures on the street of businesses and then put that associated back with a map. Well, what a computer couldn't do was tell whether each of the 3 photos that they had taken, which was the best in the opinion of a person, which was the best photo of that particular view of the street. I mean, you could try to write something, but for that particular task, it was actually something that could be split up into thousands of micro tasks and basically ask an individual, which of these 3 photos are the better depiction of this particular business? Choose one of the 3. So labor as a service, definitely something that's not something that all of us are probably going to rush out and use immediately, but something that's on the horizon that's to me has been really interesting to see how that's kind of evolved. Okay, so some next steps out of today. And again, as I mentioned, there's no silver bullet out of all of this. There's no, take this away and that's your $19 trillion idea. A lot of this is stepping stones to get the conversation going, because many of you, even more than probably the 25 to 30% of you who raised your hand who said you're using the cloud today, many of you are probably actually already using it. And it's just determining ways that you can expand that use of it in ways that you may not have imagined possible to do. So 3 things to start the conversation. We'll talk about a really simple thing that I observed to grow your brand. And I'm a product management, I'm a marketing guy. So building brands is something that really interests me as well as the technology itself. So this is something that's going to be really easy for some of you to take away from today's presentation. Second thing, talk about cheap can be costly. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And then the third thing is I want to re-emphasize one of the earlier drivers, which becomes one of the next steps for this, is really starting to separate out what your core business functions are as opposed to your core business, because those core business functions are your opportunity to leverage the cloud. So the first thing, and many of you here are using, as I mentioned, the cloud for your email services today. Very few of you, I think, are actually running a server and maintaining it and loading patches and defining blacklists and getting off of those types of denial of service things that happen to mail servers. If you are still running your own mail server, strongly recommend that you talk to one of our partners or any of the Hawaiian Telcom folks on solutions for moving away from that, because that's a lot of time you could be spent doing something else. But many of you are using cloud for email. One thing I noticed while looking at the attendee list, so 25% of you here in this room registered with an unbranded email address. And what I mean by unbranded, it means you're actually advertising my brand by being something at hawaiiantel.biz or hawaiiantel.net or some of my competitors' brands or any one of the other large email hosting. And granted, some of that might be because you used your personal email addresses to receive the confirmations, and that's something I do occasionally too, rather than use my company address. But even still, let's say a third of you did that, that's still maybe 1 in 6 who's using an unbranded email address. Hosted domain name email is a great way to extend your brand when you communicate. And many times today, when you're communicating with your customers, it's not always by phone or it's not always by being there in person in the storefront. Sometimes it's by email. Imagine if within an organization, if you walked in and the first thing you were told was, "Hi, I'm Brian from hawaiiantel.net." Right? That's the brand you're giving to somebody when you use an unbranded email address. Again, many thanks to you for using my brand out there, but this is an easy one to really leverage the cloud and the cloud-based email services that are there. Hawaiian Telcom offers this. Many other email providers offer this. In fact, this is something that we offer as part of our broadband solutions. This is a great way to utilize the cloud, and it's a simple one. And again, it's not a silver bullet. This isn't going to triple your sales. This isn't going to double your customer satisfaction. It's just a small way of being able to utilize cloud services, and email is a cloud service, to better communicate with your customers. So second thing, and I was gonna ask for who here was gonna admit to using their unbranded email address, but we'll skip that portion. Okay, so cheap can be costly, and what I mean by that is there are a lot of things out there that are free. And the thing to think about, this isn't true for everything, but the thing to think about is really evaluate and understand that total cost of ownership when you're looking at cloud technology. Really evaluate those service level agreements, the contract terms, and even what I call the exit strategy. It's not so much your exit strategy from that particular service you're purchasing, although that's important too. But it's the exit strategy of the business or the cloud service that you're utilizing. Many cloud services, and if you look at even the larger service providers, I mean, they'll spin up services, and then if that doesn't prove out, they may move away from them. What happens to your data at that point? What happens to the applications that you're running at that point? Be sure to understand and evaluate all of that as you look at different cloud services that are out there. And this goes for things like email, it goes for even things like point of sale systems, any type of service that you're purchasing. Be cognizant of what you're getting. Many times if you're getting something for free, you need to think about what is it that business or that organization is actually providing for that free service. You may not actually be the customer that they actually consider to be their customer. You may actually be a function within their core business that they're using to do something else. So think about that carefully as you look at some of your next steps in terms of applications. And then definitely consider some of the prerequisites to moving to the cloud. Security is also one of the larger issues whenever you're talking about data. I mean, there's a lot of things in the news lately, you know, even some of our largest companies here in the US, where data breaches and the security of that data, you know, has become a major topic. And fortunately, the next presentation after me, after the break, is Stephen from Fortinet, who'll go through a whole seminar around security. But definitely understand that total cost of ownership. Finally, separating your core business functions from your core business. You know, look for those opportunities to boost your productivity and your customer service by moving those functions that I mentioned to the cloud. And again, it's all about looking at what your core business is and spending your finite amount of time, your finite amount of resources, your finite amount of attention, focusing on how to better service your customers. And moving some of those functions that are still core functions. They're still critical to communicating with customers. They're still critical to being able to order, procure, sell, you know, inventory, repair, all the functions that are a part of your core business. But these are all functions that can be moved and managed by someone else so that you can focus really on what's important to your customer, which is your actual product or your actual service. And then as part of that, also considering, you know, your disaster and continuity planning as part of that, because that goes hand in hand with the upfront, and a lot of us don't like to think about it, but that goes hand in hand with, you know, on a day-to-day basis when everything's going well, how do I best use a cloud to service my customers? What happens when things don't go so well? How do I continue to service my customers? The conversation can be had within basically the same conversation about how the cloud can help manage both ends of those spectrums. So on that note, I'm gonna call up David Hurd from Hawaii DKI, and just a little bit about Hawaii DKI, and I'll ask David to give a bit more of an overview, since he's obviously probably the most familiar, much more familiar than I am, but you know, they're probably somebody who...
Let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Figure if Gary Hall can do it from Cisco Systems, I can, right? Ready, buddy?
Yep.
Raise your hands if you want to be in the photo. Woo! Thank you, buddy.
Okay, we're going for the record amount of tweets and retweets.
No, I don't think we're going to break them.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna beat Ellen.
Oscars, but...
Yeah. Okay, so as I was mentioning to David this morning, it's kind of interesting because this is one of those businesses where hopefully none of you actually ever have to call him and his team. But when you do, I mean, when you have that need, I mean, it's reassuring to know that they're there to assist you. They are a business that focuses on recovering in the event of a disaster, basically fire, flood, those types of things that you don't like to think about, like I mentioned, but they do happen. And they're there ready to respond when those things do happen. And so we invited David here, and we wanted to have kind of a discussion around how they're utilizing cloud services to be a part of those core functions that really help support, what their main business mission is. And so with that, David, if you give just a little bit more of an overview of what Hawaii DKI is, better than what I just did in a few sentences, and then maybe go into some of those core functions that you have moved to the cloud.
Okay. First of all, I want to say aloha and good morning to everyone. We're very happy and thankful to be part of this program today. We're very happy Hawaiian Telcom customers, and we just wrapped up a full year utilizing the hosted voice solution system and business all-in-one, which is a cloud-supported system. My company, Hawaii DKI, is the state of Hawaii's industry leader in water, fire, and mold damage restoration work. We're basically a niche building contractor. So as as a responder to those types of situations, very often they're emergency situations. And very often they're at odd hours. Someone has a pipe break in the condo building they live in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and for some unknown reason to them, there's water coming through their ceiling. Someone arrives home after a long day of work, opens their front door, and there's 6 inches of water throughout their entire home. Or God forbid, a fire erupts and their home or business is burned or inundated with smoke. Or perhaps one day they're cleaning and they notice a substantial amount of mold behind the water heater closet in their garage or in their kitchen. These things happen that I mentioned every single day for us. And it may or may not have happened to some of you. Some of you may or may have worked with us. You may know us, but that's who we are. So for the restoration industry in the state of Hawaii, we are that industry leader. We're a resource not just for the community, but other companies that work in that industry. And we get round-the-clock communication from the community for needs that they have that we fill. We went with the hosted voice solution system, Business All-in-One, for a few reasons. One, it allows us tremendous flexibility. We do restoration work. We no more time to be messing with phone lines, setting up phone lines, worrying about that kind of stuff. Hawaiian Telcom has taken that out of our hands. We're tremendously flexible in that at our headquarters, if we need to upsize, add more desks, add more workstations, it's very, very easy to do. Additionally, if we need to move individuals around within our headquarters, within workstations, that's very, very easy to do. In the past, we had to purchase hardware that supported X amount of phones. And if we got bigger, we had to scrap that and purchase hardware that supported X times 2 amount of phones. And if we got bigger, it goes on and on and on. Now with this system, we don't do that. I can add 20 more lines next week if I need to, and I don't have to go out and purchase communications hardware for that. Some of the systems involved with that system that we have, or some of the features, we have an automated attendant system. That means if you call my business, you hear this wonderful, lovely voice that's going to direct you to the department in my business that you need to reach. Let's say you need to reach David in marketing. You're going to come straight to my desk by pushing a certain button. Let's say you need to reach Christy in accounting. You're going to go straight to Christy's desk by pushing a button. Additionally, it doesn't take time away from one of my employees to answer that call, to field those questions. That built-in automated system efficiently directs you to who you want to reach and doesn't tie up my employees. We have a no-answer call forwarding to an answering service subcontractor that we work with, which is on the mainland. So that 3 a.m. flood, I'll be honest with you, none of us are up at 3 a.m. waiting for you to call with a flood. We're not. So that's why we've contracted with a system that does have a live body on the mainland to answer that call. And that woman that takes that call and says Hawaii DKI will then patch you to one of our cell phones. And you will reach us at 3 a.m. But unless it's that type of emergency, you're not going to reach one of us. Well, we had a situation where that subcontractor of ours kind of button hooked us a little bit and changed our forward number. So Hawaiian Telcom was forwarding our emergency call numbers to their number after hours. That number changed, and they never let Hawaiian Telcom know or us know. It was a glitch. So we weren't getting calls at that around-the-clock time frame. Well, we recognized that was happening. We contacted Hawaiian Telcom directly, and they quickly rerouted all calls to our emergency number to our general manager's cell phone. So for while I know, right? So while that bug was being worked out with our mainland subcontractor, we didn't miss calls. And you got to understand, sometimes some of these losses, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars in revenue and business that could have been lost. Because I'm telling you what, if your house is flooded at 3 a.m. and I don't answer a call, you're going in the phone book and you're finding the next restoration guy. You're not going to wait 30 seconds. So it's critical that our phone systems work, and they work all the time. And we've found this year that we've had with Hawaiian Telcom, that has been the case. It's been invaluable to us, and we haven't had the problems we've had in the past with those systems going down. Additionally, I have a 5 meg internet service for our project management system, our software. It's a very data-hungry software and intra-office communication system. We send a lot of photos back and forth, a lot of data, and we have the flexibility to expand to 10 megs if we need it. So we're better able to manage the projects that we're handling at any one time. And again, the main focus for us is that it's allowed us to do what we do without getting bogged down by doing activities that are important to our business, but it's not really what we do. I'm not a technical guy. I can't sit here and break down and explain these systems to you the way Ryan can. That's what he's an expert at. I do what I do, and our company does what we do. And I can tell you, they've untied our hands when it comes to the technical issues of our business. It's really been fantastic, and we're really, really grateful to partner with Hawaiian Telcom in that regard.
Thanks, David. So, yeah, I think one of the other things we were chatting about earlier is that, especially in your industry, I mean, you're generally the point of stability in somebody who's going through utter chaos at that point in time. So, being able to always have that ability to communicate with someone, I mean, is a critical business function. But again, it's a function that gets you to the point where you can then execute on your actual core business, which is getting somebody back to where they need to be.
Right. You can imagine, put yourself in your mind in a position where you absolutely need help, and it's not the help of emergency services that the state or county provide. It's after they leave. It's after the fire's been put out, and now your business or your home is suffering from the damage from that smoke and fire, and from the fire department. You're left with a giant mess. What do you do? So that's where we come in, and you're right, Ryan. People view us when we step into that role as the disaster recovery team as their rock. We provide stability for them in their life when it's the most chaotic. And again, if you've been through that, you know exactly what I mean. And if you haven't, you will, because when everything you own has been burned or covered in smoke and soot or been made wet, you're out of your mind. You don't know what to do. We know what to do, and we're very good at it, which is why we've become who we've become. And not worrying about communication issues, phone issues, email issues, data transfer issues lets us do that for you and for those that we serve. We have large accounts. We're preferred vendors for many, many entities, big insurance companies, big property management companies. I don't maintain those accounts if I miss calls, critical calls from them. And no doubt in your business, you have relationships and accounts or business ohana that it's important that you stay in really good contact with. The Hawaiian Telcom services allows us to do that, will allow you to do that if you're not participating with them at this time. Really give it consideration. I can tell you for us, and we're not a giant business. We got anywhere from 50 to 60 employees. So we're not huge, but we're not mom and pop anymore either. We've grown from that. But don't think you got to be, a big shot company to work in their realm. They have services for you no matter what your size is.
Thank you, David. I'll open it up for questions they may have of either one of us.
There are a lot of questions that have to be answered. Where's the data going to be stored? What's the policy on the data? Are they going to look at it? Is it mine? I know that a bunch of attorneys just bumped off a whole bunch of cloud service companies because they said the data is mine. It's all mine. And so you haven't really touched upon that. You haven't touched upon the IT service chain. Can my IT department make a transition from handling my hardware and my software to basically managing vendors? Do they have the necessary business skills? I have a question of where the servers are located. If I design a valve that's a proprietary valve that can't be exported, and I redesign it and I hit save on my computer and I store it in India, I've just violated the export administration rule. So it's really a business decision about what I can do and do with it. But I haven't heard you talk very much about how those decisions should be made and the issues we need to address before we consider using a cloud service.
Those are excellent questions. And so as I mentioned, really what we want to do today is to begin that discussion around that, because we know in each one of our individual businesses, our individual organizations, some of those things are critically important. Some of those things may have a trade-off portion to it in terms of determining cost benefit to us. And some of those things for somebody who's not into doing something that may violate a trade restriction, it may not be as large of an issue. So trying to address it all here, definitely is something that this starts the conversation, and kind of what I mentioned about really evaluating before you go and jump headfirst into signing up for the first cloud service or the first free cloud service that's out there because it's either free or because it's a cloud in it. Really understanding, I think you hit the nail on the head there, that understanding your core functions and what the impact is to your business, and for each one of us, it may be a little bit different. Some of us may have an IT staff that is going to be a definite question of how do you transition that talent there from being one of managing actual hardware to one that's managing services, or one that's managing more from a vendor management or partner management. How do you move from that, from that philosophy to another philosophy? Do you even have the right people in place to be able to do that? All of those questions are part of doing this. I think probably the two takeaways, my last two takeaways around cheap may be costly, as well as starting to separate out your business functions from your core business, I think are the first stepping stones, because you're exactly right. Understanding who owns that data, right? What is that exit strategy? As I mentioned, it's not so much your exit strategy, because that's important too, right? If you want to move from one service to another service, how do you get that data out of there and move it to something else? Because you don't want to be, they have your data, right? You want to know what happens to it and who's going to be able to move it. But also understanding their exit strategy, right? You can probably count on, if you were to take a tally sheet, or if you were to collect a bunch of nickels for every one of those companies who have launched a cloud service and have subsequently either gotten acquired or merged with something else, or decided that wasn't their core business anymore and moved to something else, and said, okay, effective January 31st, everything is going to shut down. Thanks for your business. Understanding all of those parameters around what it is that you're moving and what the agreements are going to be. I mean, those are all definite business decisions that have to be made. You definitely don't want to jump into this just for the sake of saying, oh, it's cloud, so it must be something I need to do. You don't want to get stuck in that. It truly is, and you're exactly right, it truly is a business decision, and each one of us here has different priorities, different parameters. There's some commonality. I think security is probably a key one, very key one, and we've got Stephen from Fortinet coming up in the next segment, who's going to cover some security aspects of the cloud. But definitely it's something that it's not something to be taken lightly when you make decisions. And that's probably one of my main takeaways in this, is that there's a lot of temptation to just go and do for the sake of doing. So you can either tell other people that you're using the cloud, or to tell your boss that, oh yeah, I'm starting to use that. When your boss reads about it and says, why aren't we using this? And jumping headfirst into being able to say, yeah, I'm using it. Being able to really think about why and what you're doing, I mean, that definitely is important. Okay, but thank you.